This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, high-performance cloud hosting for everyone. Visit linode.com/MacVoices and take $20 off your first server package. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, sometimes time just gets away from us and we don't catch up with friends the way we should. And so that's what we're doing this time, to talk about a very specific topic in an article he wrote. Victor Agreda is back, and we are going to talk about Pixelmator versus Photoshop CC. Victor, welcome. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Chuck.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I think the last time you were on, we were at AltConf in San Francisco.
That's very likely. I think we did one other show in between then, but my memory's fuzzy, and I do a lot of podcasts and stuff. Otherwise, produce a lot of podcasts, I should say. So I can't keep track. But
right there with you, But I really was intrigued, and it's taken us a little while to put our schedules together. So this article is not brand new, but you wrote something up for TidBITS called Pixelmator Pro. How does it compare to Photoshop CC? And ironically, the fact that our schedules couldn't get together, I think, makes this even more timely right now, with a lot of the controversies that are out there with Adobe sending these cease and desist letters out for previous versions of Creative Cloud, and the fact that they seem to be experimenting with changing the pricing model and everything. So it's a perfect time for folks to maybe look at an alternative. And it sounds like Pixelmator Pro is something that you might tell folks to consider.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was a little skeptical going in, because it seems like every decade since the 90s, someone has said, we've got a Photoshop killer. I remember using Painter back in the day, before it was even Corel. It was still under the Ray Dream. I forget the name of the actual company. They made Ray Dream Studio and Bryce 3D and some other things. And I was a big 3D nerd back in the 90s, which is a terrible time to be in it, especially on the Mac platform. But, and so Pixelmator Pro really surprised me. And I think what's especially surprising with Pixelmator, the whole suite really from them, they have been working diligently on adding new features. In fact, I just last night updated Pixelmator Pro, and they've added some transformation tools. So you can take something and you can like stretch it and skew it, whatnot, which of course, you've been able to do that in Photoshop for years. But some of these features are like catching up to Photoshop, and some of them are actually maybe a little bit beyond Photoshop. But I would say that for 80%, 90% maybe of what a lot of people do in Photoshop, you can probably do it in Pixelmator. You just have to kind of relearn a little bit of, interface and a couple of little workflow tricks, basically. But for the most part, and they have great documentation on the Pixelmator website. But I think what's interesting is that I ended up testing myself by putting myself through the paces, literally with a project that was like kind of important to me. I had this thing called Kitten Stuff Done, and it's a bunch of little physical cards. I'm thinking, like, if I have one here, I don't think I have one on my desk, oddly enough. But so it's like a bunch of little cards. Hold on. There we go. So it's these cards, and each one of them has like a 30-minute increment of stuff you do. So check email, commute, whatever. And there's multiples, obviously. Most people have more than a 30-minute commute, maybe, or whatever. So we've got some multiples. But the cool thing is that different artists contributed different art. So I had to put together the text and the graphics and all that kind of thing for 52 or more cards. I did all of that in Pixelmator Pro. And I have to say that it was so much faster than Photoshop, because really all I was doing was taking some scans, resizing, compositing, putting some text and whatnot, kind of like basic stuff you would do back in the early days of Photoshop, like version 3 when you had layers and whatnot. So I actually tested it in a production environment, and it was so much faster than Photoshop. And I'm talking about on a pretty new iMac, not an iMac Pro, but I think this iMac's like maybe a year and a half old. And part of that reason is because the Pixelmator team it is only Mac. So they have written it with all the latest APIs in OS 10. So they really tuned it to the performance. They basically did what Apple asks you to do, which is make a truly Mac native application. And Adobe, I don't envy their task. They've got to support a huge range of hardware and two different platforms, basically. So there's obviously going to be some trade-offs there, but I found it extremely capable.
So many things here I want to dig into, but let's kind of sort of in reverse order. That's the thing that I think I'm most impressed with, and I wish Adobe would do it. I mean, you think back to what Apple did with Final Cut. They rebuilt it from the ground up with a completely new metaphor, completely modern. And I know I'm going to get emails because there are people that still love the old Final Cut, and that's fine. But Adobe seems to be kind of palette happy at times, and they keep stacking features in, and then to your point, they're supporting multiple platforms. It's natural that things are going to either slow down or break or become unwieldy. And so when you look at something that's built from the ground up, modern for the current operating systems, it only makes sense that it would have some advantages.
And it makes me a little sad because I think you and I will probably remember when the G4 Tower, the silver one, came out, and Steve Jobs got up there and shows the Photoshop comparison. He was showing like how fast it was compared to a PC, and the megahertz myth and all that kind of thing. And at that point, they had really tuned it for the Mac because that's where a lot of creatives were at the time. And I mean, I think that's still probably true, maybe more so now because Apple's been doing pretty well, but. Yeah, you talked about new features, and what's funny is for a lot of people, if you open up any Adobe software and if you update through the little Adobe tool and whatnot, it'll tell you, "Hey, here's what's new." But most of the time, it's like features that you're sort of like, I mean, am I going to use this? Like, is this or is this a totally new workflow that I have to deal with? Like, they added, I don't know how much bloat to the software when they started adding all the 3D stuff and everything, and I'm just like, if I need 3D, I'm going to hop into a 3D application and export something out of there. Like, I do not need Ray Dream Studio inside of Photoshop, and all, some of this stuff is just like overkill. And I get it because Adobe's this like huge entity that's trying to, and Photoshop is used so prevalently, right? They're trying to appeal to a lot of different people, and there's pre-press stuff in there that goes way back that some people still use. And there's a lot of web stuff in there that's actually really cool and powerful and links in with other things and whatnot. And then there's the whole round tripping aspect too that you've got in Adobe. But that contributes to that bloat in the software. So if you really want it, it's kind of like, do you want a Hummer or do you want a Lamborghini, right? And the two have kind of like different use cases.
That's a really good analogy without being demeaning to either side. Because you're right, a Hummer, I mean, it's built for one thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's old or clunky. It's just built for something different. And a Lamborghini, of course, is a Lamborghini that needs no introduction.
It's fast. Well, and again, I have no gripe against Adobe per se because Photoshop, I still use Photoshop for certain cases. In fact, I was trying to do something in Pixelmator Pro the other night. I was trying to give it kind of like an old newspaper feel with the dots that you can actually see, right? And doing that in there is a little more convoluted, whereas in Photoshop, there's basically a pre-built filter in there that'll let you do that and have a lot of control over it. So, it's one of those things where it's like, what do you need? I mean, sometimes you need look, if you're making a big, complicated vegan meal, that's a lot different than if you're slapping some steaks on the grill. I mean, it's simple versus a little more complex. You got to get a food processor and make cashew milk and all this stuff. So, how dirty do you want your kitchen to be is the question.
Yeah, good point. I also want to get you to go back to the relearning, or that's probably not the right phrase, but setting up your workflows or figuring out how they work in Pixelmator, because at this point with Photoshop, you probably was like putting on your socks. You know exactly how to do it, and when you start adopting some of these newer tools, things are a little different.
Yeah, and one of the things that you'll see immediately in Pixelmator Pro when you first open it up is that you're kind of like, where did all my palettes go? Like, where are the tools? Where are the buttons? Where is everything? And they've somewhat, to my chagrin, and maybe I sound like a cantankerous Andy Rooney here, but is that the right guy? Yeah, Andy Rooney, not Mickey Rooney. they're both lovable. One's more curmudgeonly.
Yeah,
But,
let's do a show.
but I'm not super in favor of this whole minimalistic design. Like I finally got around to upgrading things to version 3, right? Because I got an iPhone, I got the 10R, and I noticed that like the interface on 2 was not going all the way to the bottom, and it just started to bug me. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll upgrade. I love the software. I'll support the developers and all that. But then I go in and all the lists have lost the line in between each list item. And I'm just like, oh man, come on guys. There's cognitive science behind some of these user interface elements. Like, we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So to that end, Pixelmator Pro is very, very sparse at first. But the cool thing is that you can customize it to the point, not as much as Photoshop, because like you said, Photoshop's a little palette heavy. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, if you want to go nuts, you can have nothing but little boxes all around and then your image areas like this, right? You can't do that with Pixelmator. It's just, you got some layers over here, and then you've got your tools over here, and you've got a pretty nice sparse area to work with in between. So they've tried to streamline and get you to focus. But they're also very responsive to user feedback. And I think that they've been really good about listening to customers and kind of adding some features. Because one of the things people pointed out, the backdrop is a very dark, it's kind of like the dark mode, night mode or whatever that's so popular right now. And they had this darker color gray, basically. It wasn't a pure black, but it was like a dark, dark gray. And there are physiological reasons why a 50% gray is better for our eyes, especially if you're going to be staring at a screen for 8 hours a day doing graphics work. And so I believe they have allowed you to modify that. I know that they support Mojave's night mode now as well. So they've got a couple of options that they're starting to add in, and that's cool too. I don't feel like you see that as much with Adobe, but they also have an exponentially larger user database. So, I can imagine the crazy feature requests that they get.
And they probably take a lot of heat whenever they try to drop features, because everybody does. So, your natural inclination is, let's try to minimize the negative, just keep giving new features. And I have to admit, I'm always intrigued by all of these programs. When I see these amazing images pop out, and then you read the tutorial of the 75 steps it took to get there. And okay, I can duplicate those 75 steps, but how did you ever figure it out to go to, palette number 27 and change the setting from 3 to 5? It's crazy. It's crazy. Talk for just a second, though, about the card project. So this was image manipulation, or was this just primarily cropping and enhancing and laying some text in?
It was a little bit of image manipulation, but not a whole lot. I had to do a little bit of color correction. I don't know that I have a deck right here. I should have brought one because I could promote it, but I've got one. I was going to open it up, but I bet it's going to be hard to open because these things are shrink wrapped. Oh, hey, here we go. We got scissors. So
crack one open.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, that's part of the deal, right? You got to build in a bunch. I'm about to order a whole bunch more, as a matter of fact, because we're about to stock our store and open up an actual store. We had a Kickstarter that fully funded, a little bit overfunded. So to give you an idea, like some of these were full graphics like that, right? And so what I did was added in the text, and I actually created a template, to facilitate things. But each one's a little bit different because each one of them, the graphics are slightly different, right? And we had a whole bunch of different artists contribute. Now, what's interesting is this one I added a little bit of kind of a drop shadow, which you can't natively do in Pixelmator. They don't really have layer styles. So with this one, I just copied that and put it back there and darkened it, whatnot. But I also had to do a little bit of cleanup. This was a friend of mine's kid who's an artist and does these really cool things. So that one, and I had to, darken it a little bit and do your simple color correction stuff. But again, that is a little bit different in Pixelmator Pro, because another thing that they do, there's no history palette. which is maybe the biggest deal breaker for a lot of hardcore Photoshop people, because with history, you can like jump back to certain parts of things that you might have done, right? So you can kind of play what if, like, oh, what if I tried these 8 steps? I'm going to go back to this, right? You can do that, but it's a lot of undoing, and it's just a different mindset with Pixelmator Pro, and part of that's because of the image manipulation stuff that's built into OS 10, and they tried to like adhere to a lot of the APIs that Apple's opened up. One of those being, of course, machine learning, but where it tries to guess like what's in the actual image itself, and sometimes with hilarious results. But yeah, I did, even things that were full of text. It does a great job with text manipulation. And so, these cards I was able to very easily resize things. The first time I did them, they weren't big enough to print with good quality. So I had to go back in and resize stuff. It wasn't difficult working with this stuff, but once you figured out kind of the way that Pixelmator Pro thinks versus Photoshop, and there are just enough little tweaks like that to where you kind of have to, read the documentation, which nobody wants to do.
Well, you mentioned it being faster, and that really intrigued me. And because are you talking about rendering, or are you talking about just the ability to get things done because of the arrangement of the tools, even with the work? I guess filter out the fact that there had to be a bit of a learning curve. But what part was faster about
it? The software itself is significantly faster. From time to double click, or from time to launch to ready state, I mean, it's probably 80% faster than Photoshop. And so there's that. But then also, rendering things. And again, I'm dealing with print, right? Or, printed material. So you have to have pretty high DPI for that. And even manipulating stuff that had multiple layers, because some of the other things that I did for this, I've got other packs that are coming in and they've got multiple layers. And even applying effects and this kind of thing, they're all using the core graphics tools that are in OS 10. So it's actually using Metal to do the graphics stuff, the number crunching basically. So between Metal and the GPU and all of that, and how Apple does everything, where it's very tightly what should I say, coordinated, sort of within the software and the hardware components and whatnot, you just see a lot more speed. Sometimes it'll take Photoshop a minute to figure something out, not a minute, but a little bit slower. And especially if you're getting into those high DPI ranges, you're definitely going to see some kind of a slowdown. Now, that being said, Photoshop, again, more capable. You've got things like layer styles. You've got some stuff that you just don't have access to in Pixelmator Pro. So that's where I saw Photoshop slow down, especially back in the day when I was learning from videos by like Burt Monroy, right? And that was one of those guys who you're talking about where it's like, how did you even figure out how to make a city out of nothing, which is what he does. And it's just incredible. And he's not the only one, but these photorealistic renderings that are all pixels from nowhere. It's incredible stuff. But doing that in Pixelmator Pro would actually take you longer because you don't have access to some of those tools. And I think some of that's just because that's what people are used to. And so if you were to go back to a day when Photoshop didn't have layer styles, people were still able to get certain results. They just had to go about it a different way.
Linode is supporting this edition of MacVoices. You can build it on Linode. One problem with so many virtual cloud hosts is the hidden costs. What looks to be a good deal at the start isn't so great when the bill comes. Fees for extra services, extra capabilities, data transfer, and the like all build up. With Linode, you don't have to worry. Plans range from a $5 per month Nanodes plan up to a high-powered dedicated CPU server. Even better, you can start with one and grow into another with just a few clicks. CPU, network, storage, and RAM all bundled into one low price with no surprises and the ability to upgrade anytime you wish. Pay for only what you use with hourly billing across all plans and add-on services. And that is on top of all the other considerations that you have to take into account when picking a server host. Speed of your server, backups, options for one-click installs, geographic location of your server, documentation, customer support, the list goes on and on. Linode has lots going for it, And you can turn that into lots going for you by visiting linode.com/MacVoices and check out all the options. Then, when you buy, be sure to use that same URL, linode.com/MacVoices, to get $20 off your first purchase. What are you waiting for? Your virtual server awaits at linode.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Linode for their support of this week's MacVoices.
So again, at the top, I think you said that you felt like Pixelmator Pro has 80 to 90% of what most people want, or I may be misquoting you, but you get the idea. So what are the things that are absolutely unconditionally missing at this point from Pixelmator Pro that would say, I have to stay with Photoshop?
Layer styles, I think, for me is a big one. I can't think of a whole lot else unless you are working on specific stuff. Now, they do have like web slicing, so that's cool. That's something that I use quite a bit, or I used quite a bit in Photoshop. There's some pre-press stuff, and again, some of these are specialized things that are in Photoshop. It's hard for me to imagine. Oh, the history palette, I would say, is another one that I really, really wish that there was some way of kind of looking at the steps. It's even helpful for people who are learning Photoshop because they're able to go back and see, oh, here's what I did. And then they can kind of go back and play around with the different, because sometimes there are things that happen in Photoshop that depend on the sequencing of the way that you do them, right? And so that pipeline, if you're used to that, then Pixelmator is going to be a little bit of a learning curve for you overall, especially if you rely on those things. The other thing that I would say is that masking and like clipping masks and that kind of thing, they work fine. It's just maybe not as robust as you might find in Photoshop. So if you find yourself doing like a lot of masking effects, combining with layer styles and this sort of stuff, that can get a little bit squirrely in Pixelmator Pro. So I would say that, that's why I say 80 to 90% of people are going to find Pixelmator Pro does just fine. Because if you need text compositing and that sort of stuff, it does great. I will say also that the text tool is not quite as robust. There's a couple of little things that, I mean, like I'm actually going to launch it here just to make sure that I don't say the wrong thing, because I'm pretty sure that there's not a lot of support for things like kerning. And so let's see if I go here and type. Yeah, you have bold, italic, and underline. You can, choose a font, and then of course a family like medium italic, bold italic, that kind of thing. But you've got line height and character spacing. So there you've got kerning. It's not called kerning, obviously, but that's about it. So if you want to do any of those like cool text transforms that Photoshop can do and still keep it, as vectors and whatnot, that's a little bit more of a problem.
I am a little surprised because. But on the other hand, I mean, this is Pixelmator Pro. It's for images primarily, although text manipulation seems to go hand in hand with that at this point. So
yeah, I mean, there's somebody put out. In fact, when Adobe, this whole brouhaha about the price increase went up, which is not quite as bad as I think some of the headlines made it sound. What they were doing was. Adobe's website lists $19.99 rather than the $9.99 for the monthly on Photoshop, Lightroom, and Lightroom Classic. And it said it was testing them out. And Adobe told Petapixel that sometimes they run tests, and so including plan options. Well, the thing was, it was a boost in cloud storage, right? And so you went from 200 gigs per month to a terabyte per month under that new pricing. So really, it wasn't raising the cost of the software, it was raising the cost of the online storage, which I don't know how many people use that. I'm not a big user of their cloud storage. I don't trust many clouds. Have a good backup strategy, and someone else's cloud is not always it. So that was one thing, but like there were a lot of lists that came out as to, well, here's alternatives for everything that Adobe offers. And some of them were adorable, but not quite really where they should be. And I love Sketch. I think it is, I hate Adobe Illustrator. So I absolutely love Sketch. I think it's fantastic. I was a freehand user back in the day. And so I've got freehand version 1.0 still on a 3.5-inch disc. Okay. And so I was a huge fan of freehand back in high school. so when Illustrator came out, I tried it and it just blows my mind. I could go on for an hour about how I hate Illustrator, but Sketch was like, it's one of those things that was like designed from the ground up to be a Mac application. It runs so much faster. It's so much more intuitive and, I don't know, user friendly in general. But what made me sad was that on that list, the only alternative to Audition was Audacity, and no, that ain't it. That's a whole other show. Is Audacity versus Audition? There's no contest.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not an Audacity fan either. And I do not use Audition, so I almost need to sit that one out. But yeah, Audacity has caused me some heartburn at times. Let's just leave it at that. Because you're right, that is a whole other show.
Yeah.
But as an aside, it fascinates me to hear you say this. Pixels drive me crazy. I know they're great, but vectors, I understand. I can work with vectors. Pixels, you have to upsample to get them, to increase the size, and they never seem to print out quite right. And vectors work for me. So just the way it is.
There's a reason why my Twitter handle is Super Pixels and not Super Vectors, though, right? It would have been great. It would have been great with Victor and Vector, and you'd think it would make sense, but no, I'm a pixel guy, not a vector guy.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's good. Victor, Super Vector. Yeah, okay. Maybe just Sketch. Maybe
someday. Yeah.
This is your secret identity. But you're right; those lists keep coming out, and I think that the lists are valuable because, to your point, not everybody needs all these features. If you are a Bert Monroy or a Deke McClelland, great. Good for you. You need all that stuff, and frankly, you can probably afford the fastest machines out there. But for so many of us, this is just overkill, and we all want to believe we're pros. Or that we need these pro tools, when the simple fact of the matter is that there are a lot of other things that are A, more affordable, B, easier to learn, and C, will fulfill all our needs just fine.
Yeah, and I think that it is one of those things too where, of course, there's a lot of discussion about this, in the technology sector in general, right? Because I know Farhad Manju over at, I think it's Wall Street Journal still, but he had a great article months ago that was talking about how, if you want to participate in the digital economy these days, you are ultimately going to be rolling up to Apple, Google, Facebook, or Amazon, right? And Microsoft. So it's like the big five. And, fast forward or rewind 15 years ago, you had a lot more players kind of in the space, right? And so, granted, those were still pretty big, maybe not Facebook, obviously, but it's sort of one of those things where it's like we're back to these real juggernauts, and how do you compete against Adobe? There's no way that you're going to cut them down to size in terms of market share, right? You're not going to take a huge chunk. I don't see Adobe losing 50% of its customers in the next 5 years. But I do think that people are going to find that maybe a different tool might be just a more efficient way of doing something. And so maybe they'll have both, they'll have Pixelmator. That's what I do. I've got Pixelmator Pro, and I pay for the whole Adobe CC suite because I use almost everything. And I still use Final Cut Pro and Premiere. It just kind of depends on the project that I'm wanting to do, because sometimes Final Cut Pro makes me want to cry. And I know how to do everything in Premiere because I've been using it since 1994, but it's a whole other thing.
Well, no, you're right, and this is the thing, because this is not a religious argument. You got to pick the right tool for the job, and part of picking that right tool is knowing how to use it or to get it to do what you want it to do. So if there's nothing. If Premiere does it for you, if Audition does it, if Photoshop does it, that's great. But the thing I want to do here is just examine alternatives and say, folks, there are alternatives out there for you to consider. The Affinity folks are doing some amazing things with Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. I know I'm going to leave some out, and I apologize, but Acorn is out there. There's so many of these image manipulators that are great. And no, they can't compete necessarily with all the features of Photoshop, but they may compete with the ones that you really need.
Yeah, there's something that my son and I are going to do. Last year, we made a video game that sort of goes through computer history, and you've got to figure out a sequence of keys on the keyboard to hit to move a progress bar across the screen, and then it goes to the next era of computer history and whatnot. It was fun. And so this summer, we want to do a platformer. We want to do like a retro platformer, which is sort of in vogue. Well, maybe it was in vogue last year, but anyway. And so we're looking at these different pixel, the 8-bit pixel art type apps. And there's quite a few of them out there. And there's some that have been around actually for a little while. And there's several, of course, for the iPad, which is kind of an ideal thing because with the pen, I've got an iPad Pro and a pen, and it's like easy to just click the little dots and make stuff happen. You can do a lot of that stuff in Photoshop, which is what a lot of these, like, I can't remember the name of the artist, but he did Engadget's branding several years ago. It's that, 3/4 perspective, isometric view type thing, like that style. And he did all of that stuff in Photoshop, which you can do. You just have to set up your workspace in certain ways, right? You get your grid set up and snap to and all this kind of thing. So you can do it, but it's not purpose built for that task, right? And that was sort of Apple's mantra. I remember early on in the App Store on iOS or iPhone OS or whatever in the day, it was, don't make an app that does a million things. Make something that does a very specific thing, right? And so that's like what you're talking about. Maybe that's why we don't have a full version of Photoshop in iOS, is because there's just no way to put all that, cram it down and stick it on a phone or a tablet yet. Instead, you see Adobe kind of dipping their toe in the water with different apps that are very finely tuned for that particular platform. So I think that's the thing, is that, pick the tool that makes sense and pick the tool that's going to get you the results as quickly as you can. Because, if you're working as a contractor in the gig economy or whatever, you're trying to get stuff done as efficiently as possible, so that it saves you time and it saves your clients money, hopefully.
Yeah, and I do not pretend to be conversant in any of the iOS apps for Adobe, or for that matter, really any of the image manipulation apps for the iPad. But I do think it is interesting, to your point, the way Adobe is approaching things. They are finely tuned. They're not one-trick ponies, but they're in that category that if you want to accomplish just this task, that's great. If you want to accomplish that task, that's great. Use this app. And I have to wonder if that might reverse flow back up to the desktop to try to solve some of the problems or the challenges that Photoshop faces. I shouldn't say problems, challenges.
Yeah, wasn't it called Open Doc years ago when they were talking about, busting up apps basically? And so it was sort of interesting too, because if you look in hindsight, it's almost like that was an early app economy, or at least that was the mindset, right? Because I remember reading that, like, okay, here was the theory. You'd buy Photoshop, but if you needed advanced text tools, or if you needed, pre-press, all the pre-press stuff, you'd get that separately. And then that would kind of bolt into the larger application and whatnot. And I'm kind of sad that didn't come to pass, because I like this idea of modular software where you can add to it. Like, wouldn't it be cool if GarageBand, you could like click a few things and then boom, all of a sudden you've got, maybe 20% more features that brings it a little closer to Logic, but it's not quite there because you don't need all of this other stuff that's in Logic, right? But that's not the world we live in. We've got iMovie, we've got Final Cut Pro, we've got GarageBand, we've got Logic and whatever. But it is something that people think about. And honestly, with plugin architectures, which is something people who are just casual with this like necessarily don't think about. But if you are a pro working in the field, whether it's Audition and you're talking about VST plugins, or whether it's Photoshop or even Final Cut Pro, there's all this world of plugins, which are standalone applications in themselves. They just happen to be working within a larger application. And some of those things are just mind blowing. I mean, they're incredible. Of course, I remember Kai Power Tools. That was one of my favorite things back in the day.
I'm right there with you. I've spent quite a bit of time listening to Kai and his philosophies on interfaces, which I always thought were interesting. Oh shoot, I can't remember what the software was, but do you remember the one with the developing interface that, as you got a little better, it released more features to you?
I do remember that. Yeah, and I can't remember the name of it either. Well, didn't Kai Power Tools do that a little bit? I think it did.
I think it did too. But there was one specifically that he showed off that I forget, and of course naturally we all had to figure out ways to cheat it because we wanted all the tools, even though we had no idea what to do with them when we got them.
Yeah. I love that idea though. I mean, again, imagine if GarageBand, as you used it more, it could be like in oh no, I've forgotten the name of the movie where they're hunting bugs and it's a big space movie. I don't know. No, it's Starship Troopers. There we go. On the videos, they'll be like, want to know more? It's like, want to have more power? You're using GarageBand and you can click a couple of buttons and boom, it's like Logic, so that would be kind of cool, but yeah.
Well, it almost feels like the restaurant model right now where the solution is charge you more, give you more food, and then send you home with it, or cause you to gain weight, one of the two. I don't need 4 crab cakes. Let me order just one, and if I want, get 2, and then if I can double the order. No, we're going to sell you 4 crab cakes, and then you can take them home.
Yeah,
different world.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I give you a chance to plug everything you're doing now, but especially the cards, since we talked about them.
Yeah, well, Kit and Stuff Done. You can go to kitandstuffdone.com. You can look us up. We got Instagram and a Facebook page, of course, and all that. And right now we are still finishing up fulfilling the Kickstarter orders because we had some production problems. In fact, you'll get a kick out of this. I did have to lower myself to using a PC. No, I'm just kidding. I have a gaming Windows PC in there. And if you go get one of these like off-brand laser etcher things, and mine just does like balsa wood is about as advanced as it'll do, or plastic a little bit. And so I was trying to make these like extra big boxes because, you got a 52 card deck, but we sell booster decks. This will fit more than just 52 cards in it, right? So we're trying to do these for the Kickstarter people who ordered the big box so they can get more cards. And I tried to laser etch this, and it turned out all wonky. And so I've had to go through all these, it's Kickstarter stuff. So it's like you got to figure out how stuff works before you can launch the full production. So we're hoping to launch the full site at the end of June. And yeah, Kit and Stuff Done is probably the big thing that I'm doing right now. I still have Angry Dad Gamer. We're kind of rebooting that later this summer, where we'll have that video game I was talking about. And you're going to be the first one to know this officially. But we're also going to be working on a Kit and Stuff Done app that will run on the iPhone and the watch. Because, part of this, this is sort of based on Pomodoro system, right? So 30-minute increments and whatnot. So it makes sense that you would put together all the cards of the stuff that you want to do that day, get done. Because I would always forget, like, do I need to check email? Do I have projects to do, this, that, and the other? So what we'll do is you go through and you'll, I want to do this card. I want to check email now. Or you can hit a thing and say randomize. Like, I don't know what to do. I got decision fatigue. Bam. Okay, I'm going to work on this project for the next 30 minutes. And then hit a button and it'll give you a timer and away you go. So I think it's a great way for people who are like knowledge workers or maybe freelancers or whatever to kind of keep themselves on task and make sure that, things don't get out of hand. Because it's easy to just like ignore email for a few days and then it gets out of control. But, everything is a step towards what you need to get done, right? And I felt like there was nothing between just like listing all your tasks out for the day, which can get overwhelming, and just doing stuff like, well, every day you got to, it's like Farmville, you got to go in and tend to your email crops and that kind of thing. And there wasn't a whole lot of structure in between those two. So that's what we're trying to fill.
We're way off topic, but I'm intrigued. This is a really interesting approach. When you were talking about the cards, I'm thinking, okay, do I deal these out every day and get a full house one day and a royal flush the next day? And how's this work? But I like the idea of the card metaphor that really lets you target different things, and especially if you've got as you said, those repetitive tasks that you have to do every day, they're always there right in front of you.
Plus, it's easy for us who work at desks to work until I saw that you had Brett on, and Brett Terpstra, and he's one of those people. He's like me, where we will get heads down in something, and next thing you know, we look around and the entire house is dark. It's midnight outside. We're like, what happened? My coffee is cold, right? And so this also helps you kind of plan out, okay, don't get too far into the weeds. And yeah, you can either plan, if you're a control freak, you can plan all 8 hours by putting 16 cards together and saying, here's what I'm going to do step by step. Or if you just be like, okay, I got to get these 4 things taken care of today. And, I'll shuffle them up and I'll see what we're going to work on first, right? These are all crunchy frogs. What am I going to eat first? Oh, there we go. Email. So yeah, that's the idea, is to kind of gamify your productivity, but also reduce some of that cognitive overload that people have, because decision fatigue is a real thing. When I go to work at 4, by the time I'm done at noon, I still come home and I write client work. And I'm like, how am I doing this? My brain.
Yeah, and I too am guilty of, you get into something and you look at the clock and you think, I really should get a little bit of sleep. Well, if I could just get a little more done. And, 3 hours later, you're still looking at getting just a little more done. And, then you really pay for it the next morning. So, yeah. Victor, websites, social media, I know we said SuperPixels on Twitter. Where else should folks find you?
You can also actually go to my website. I do have victoragreda.com. And so that's got some of my writing samples and voice samples. I do a lot of voice stuff right now. I've got some Fiverr work that I'm doing for people where I do Rick Sanchez's voice from Rick and Morty. It's an interesting business. But yeah, Victor Agreda and .com, and that's probably the biggest thing. I'm actually rebooting that website next month as well, and so it'll have links to all these crazy projects that I work on, because I feel like maybe I do too many projects.
You can never do too many projects. It's just you have to finish them. That's the trick.
That's right. Yes.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time off of all those projects to talk to us about this. That article really resonated with me, and especially with some of the things that have happened since it was written, it feels like it resonates even more. So thanks for the time.
Absolutely, Chuck. Thanks so much.
Yeah, let's not make it as long between this next time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, maybe I'll do my Audacity versus Audition article.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Just let me know, and we'll do the video supplement to it right here.
Will do.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I hope you got something out of this. The idea here, just to be very clear, is not to bash Adobe or bash anybody, but just to let you know there are alternatives out there that may suit you as well or better. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.